I wanted to take some time here to get some, before we go into doing some of these practices, and I want to prepare for it also doing some dances where we get into the body more and we really have a sense of a shamanic kind of relationship with body, and then I want us to, and we'll probably spend most of the afternoon doing these types of practices. But I wanted to get some reports from people as to, you know, the sort of things that you're noticing in your journaling, in your reflection on the breath in the course of these different things that are coming up for you. Is there anything that you brought here that you wanted to share in that way? Yes.
I've been really pleased the increased awareness of the subtlety when I tune into my breathing. It then makes sense when you read this about the very thing we were talking about, avidity. So emotions come up, and instead of just riding the wave of the mind and the emotion, I come back to my breath. And it's an ongoing process, but I'm finding that my breath is allowing a different outcome of how I carry on with that emotion or with that thought. And it really has been that thicker breath that is one. One other, I thought, rather exciting thing, I lift weights. And so I was doing that Friday. And I have a heart condition, so sometimes I have to pay attention a little more when I'm doing this. And so, usually I pause between sets. And I thought, let's be aware of my breathing and see how that affects things. I was very pleased. I had no symptoms of the heart condition. I felt even better when I was done with my workout. Sometimes I'm tired, sometimes I feel good. And I know it was because of 3 months of using these practices. I would do things like I found that through Fikr, I now have a more extended inhalation and exhalation. I can rest in them, both the inhalation and the exhalation, and it's nice, it's pleasant, even after, doing some pretty big weights. And then I also checked in on the left and right nostril. So here I'm sitting, there are all these guys grunting, and, and I'm just like, okay, let's see. Okay, all right, good, there's the fire, but let's see, I gotta calm down. And I use those intentionally in between sets, and it actually produced an effect. Now I don't know how to define that at this point, but I'm saying I'm pleased with the breathing does increase an ability in me, and it may be that connection. I don't know, is it the connection to the soul of the person?
Well, just knowing a few of the mechanical things we've worked on here will help, noticing, when the breath is out of rhythm, bringing it into rhythm, bringing in that connection with the mother of all, with the silence, with the light, with the ether, will bring in definitely a balancing and an enhancing aspect of it.
Absolutely, and so the two words that came to me as I was doing that, certainly there's the physical, like, okay, there's an obvious physical benefit, right? But then there's the metaphysical that also happens and those are the subtleties when I'm walking my dogs, and I decided to do, well, let's just breathe the elements, right? And I just started. And it was on your cue of last month where you said, okay, let's, because I know I'm 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, this is this. I just went, okay, earth, okay, and then they just all just felt like they were flowing, one after the other. I don't know if it's just the repetition of hearing about it, but that felt more not on a physical plane. That felt more on a metaphysical plane of experiencing the elements and the ether. Mm-hmm. And I was surprised that it was that complete. But I'm efforting a lot also in trying the daily practices. So when I can have a moment where, oh, this feels more metaphysical, more of the magnetism of breath.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess I just want to say that really letting myself take this time in the morning to, I felt like an indulgence at first, but I'd really take a long time to do these practices and feel the rhythm. And just in general for me, I'm having more ability to be in conversation with people at work and even in difficult meetings, in times when I have to manifest force, and also with my partner in trying, learning to negotiate, and I've had such a tendency to be very excitable, and that then limits my ability to stay in whatever the conversation needs to be. And so having more ability just to say one thing and then stop, which I have trouble doing, or just to listen, but then to say something that I really need to say. And so it's kind of a general thing, but I can see that it's helping me, giving myself this permission to really do these introverted, solitary things, the inner things. But then it seems to allow me to be with people in a way that I didn't seem to have the ability to before, because I would get so wound up, But maybe it's just kind of calming down or getting that rhythm that then lasts through the day. But so it's not a specific thing, but it's more like a general, pervasive benefit.
Very interesting. Anybody else with anything they want to share in this regard? Yeah, go ahead, Nancy.
I noticed that my lifelong resistance to following instruction rises.
Yeah.
And I've efforted, that word, to follow directions. And there is benefit to that. And trying to summon up willingness, and just willingness to be with the practices as presented, and sort of abandoning my own inner agenda, which I may or may not be conscious of, but seems to be there. But I do find myself wondering and wanting to go into that place that people have kind of described before as let the breath breathe you, where I'm not controlling the breath, or I'm not having it in a rhythm, or I'm not seeking a particular element. And I'm just wondering, how can I stay in the spirit of engaging with the practices as given, and maybe also allowing for that other latitude?
I think by making the effort to stay with, rhythm, long refinement, being aware of the turnover of the breath in both places, you establish a certain ground, which you can then become less and less conscious of, because it becomes in a natural foundation. And I think that's what some people are reporting by working with the practices. All of a sudden they have a different relationship in the course of the day. Not when they're not trying to do anything, it just is coming out in different ways. But but after sitting, after making that effort to follow the instruction, and in these basic ways, then one progressively withdraws more and more of a sense of one's own conscious will involved in it, until one is in the fikr asir, where you're not trying to impose anything on it. You're simply flowing with the essence that is in the breath. So that's a natural direction that it goes. But the caveat is, the warning is to not to jump there, because we want to, it's like, Morali, I mean, if you'll go in and listen to him practice his tablas or his katak, it's a performance. He loves it, but he's there doing it by himself, it's more work, you have to, So, we want to jump to that thing that we really enjoy doing, the performance, so to speak, just living it, just being it, but, there's the practice of it that allows us to internalize certain principles that allow us then to be free in a way that allows our performance, when we're not thinking about it, to be enhanced in a deep way. And then to notice, to check in, when you are in the midst of activity and you're experiencing confusion of some sort, whether it's fear or anxiety or some sort of panic, some sort of, being overly emotional, being angry, anger is really coming up, that sense of, to check in and say, okay, can I be a little more what happens when I become more conscious now of my breath here? I see what condition it's in. Okay, now I start applying these principles again, and bringing ether into it, which is something I really want to work on practically, and so then that it becomes naturally moderated, and then I can let go of it again. You see, but to have that place where you have a kind of a remembrance light that goes on that triggers you to look at you, to be introspective when you're confused or when your breath gets out of rhythm in some way, is a good way to approach
I once
it.
had the experience where I was walking in the movie theater, and suddenly there's that pure breath
Yeah.
and that joy of it, that flowiness. And I think the practices also allow me not to be overreactive to that. Is that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense to me, you accept it when it comes and you cherish that breath that is coming, and you don't react to it in that way. But when it comes up with a kind of a sense of confusion, that's an invitation to go into it more consciously. Because we have the ability we know a few things about how to purify the breath, how to bring it into a state of balance that will help us get clarity around what's confusing us, whether it's, in whatever realm it is. Yeah.
My problem seems to be that I'm so busy so often that I feel like I'm running on empty, just time after time. And so there have been times during the month when I didn't do the practices and so on. And a part of me knows that I must be creating this reality, that, and so it's really interesting to hear you talking about like creating a morning practice with more spaciousness. But I find that I have to make these conscious choices. It's like, can I prepare this and still have time for the practices, or so I wound up doing maybe like just the basic breath practice and so on. But I don't know. I'm just wondering about that sort of pace of life aspect of all of this, that we're living in this really this world that seems to just demand so much. And
Yeah, well, the world demands, but you sit here with the choice every breath as to how you're going to respond. And in the midst of activity, you can find spaciousness. You can find it right in the midst of it, because it's our sense of being pressured by having to do so much. It creates it changes our breath. It puts a certain kind of stress on it that takes away that spaciousness that you can move in otherwise. Because it happens to everybody, and all of a sudden we're feeling in a much more convoluted or contracted space we need to. I find working with these practices consciously, like in this group, you know, in my everyday life, I'm talking to more people. I'm engaged with more people. I'm less holding myself separate in the midst of activities, you know, that are going on around me. That's just an observation I make. I'm not saying this is better, you know, but you know, it's more human. It's more connected. I like it in that way. But I do know that it is a matter, we put up that pressure on ourselves by the expectations that we're putting on ourselves. And very often you accomplish what you have to do without putting that pressure on. If you can just, you can do the same things, but without putting that same pressure on yourself, because you're taking the pressure off of your breath when you notice how your breath is getting distorted by the pressures that you're feeling. But I like having this kind of conversation about what's really coming up for you, and there's no shame here, nothing that is bad. You know, it's all just what comes up that we deal with. And yes,
I was practicing looking at those points, that point at the top and the bottom of the breath,
Yeah.
where we're changing. And I found through the whole thing, I'm watching myself, but at the peak and the bottom, I felt like I was farther outside watching, and the thought process was happening less, you know, the distracting thoughts. So then I went and I looked up what's actually happening in the body at those points, and there is all kinds of stuff going on. Shafi might know. I mean, as the carbon dioxide builds up, the body starts to desire to exhale during this time. And after we've exhaled, as the oxygen is getting used up, the body goes from being satisfied to starting to desire to inhale. So I was wondering, on the higher sense of looking at it, if these are the points where our intention can change from, I forget the two words we use, but from bringing the unity within and then, you know, sending the unity out.
yeah.
This is actually, if we're breathing consciously, our own intention can change just like the body's intention changes. So that's what I wrote.
Yeah, interesting.